The underlying question in all of these episodes is, how did a serial predator become the mayor of the family values capital of wine country? Welcome to If Grapes Could Talk, your one and only source into the corrupt lives of wine country's elite. And who am I? How did Dominic Foppoli become the mayor of a family values town? Well, those and many others are secrets I will happily tell. Before we get started, this series may upset you for two very important but valid reasons. First, since we are talking about corruption and real people, we will be touching on some disturbing themes that may upset you. However, I will never go into any graphic descriptions and I won't show any graphic images. I don't want to. All of the allegations I'll be discussing are already on the public record. I will always share my sources in the description box below if you want to investigate further. That being said, I may share statistics, describe general trends and patterns, reference specific details to illustrate my point, and the central villain of today's episode, Dominic Foppoli, has been referred to as the grapist on Reddit, and I may borrow that phrase for myself. Second, I am a huge nerd and will be referencing pop culture throughout this series, which means I may spoil you if I reference something you haven't seen before. However, my promise from me to you is that I will never spoil anything that is less than a year old. So with those warnings out of the way, let's dish. Okay, my battery's charged, my earrings are in, now let's actually dish. If you haven't heard, now former Mayor Dominic Foppoli resigned from his position May 21st, 2021, after Farrah Abraham, former star of Teen Mom, became the 9th woman to publicly accuse him of sexual assault. In addition to being the former mayor of Windsor, you may know Dominic Foppoli from his appearances with Guy Fieri, his appearance with Steve Harvey. Unfortunately, Guy Fieri also endorsed Foppoli. It's not a good look. Guy Fieri, I don't always endorse political candidates, but when I do, they turn out to be big old creeps. I would like if Guy Fieri would at least, acknowledge that he endorsed Foppoli and that he hopefully doesn't anymore. I think that's a reasonable request to make of someone that went out of their way to endorse a political candidate in an election that they have no business endorsing anyone in. Let me get this out of the way. When I first read Alexandria Bordas and Cynthia DeZikis' investigation into the allegations against Dominic Foppoli, their first report outlining 4 allegations against him, I believed them. 1, just because in this house we believe women. But 2, because they weren't news to me, as I went over in episode 1. These 2 journalists' ongoing investigation is also just, wow, it's so good. But I am biased because I've been interviewed by them. Their research for the San Francisco Chronicle serves as the backbone of my work, my analysis. So those articles, along with anything else that I reference, will be linked in the description box below. Now, I probably could give you 3 straight hours of my grapist mayor. I have a lot to say about Dominic Foppoli, but for everyone's mental health, especially mine, I'll be trying to limit myself to 5 30-ish minute Windsor/Dominic Foppoli episodes. The underlying question in all of these episodes is, how did a serial predator become the mayor of the family values capital of wine country? So let me explain what I mean by family values capital of wine country. So first of all, Windsor really is a small town. It's 27,000 people. And to put that in perspective, Odessa, Texas, the town that the series and movie Friday Night Lights is based on, is 90,000 people. So almost 4 times as big as the small town in Northern California. And by all-American, I mean the stereotypical all-American vibe that you get everywhere from beer commercials to political campaigns where candidates make appeals to faith, family, all that good stuff. For example, we have a Hometown Heroes program, which essentially is a program that puts banners like on street lamps, that honor people from Windsor that are serving in the military abroad. And this is an incredibly popular program. And I think you'd just agree that this isn't a program that you would automatically associate with like a town in wine country in California in hippie central, right? It's not, and that's okay. However, the huge amounts of wealth in the area and the fact that it comes from the classy alcohol industry makes it an interesting place to see a town try to assert itself as a family values small town. There's a lot more socioeconomic diversity in Windsor than I think you'd expect from a small town. We have everything from gated communities with mansions that wouldn't look out of place in Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, and we have mobile park homes filled with retirees. Editing Rye here, which is essentially normal Rye but with no face makeup and an animal onesie. I'm gonna take out a 5-minute rant that I went on about how the census is racist. I just wanted to make it clear that even though I'm saying that Windsor is kind of like this stereotypical small town family values place, I think for a lot of people, they then picture something very white, and that's just not what Windsor is. We have a very prominent Spanish-speaking Latinx population, and the fact that Windsor is more racially diverse than the stereotype that I'm using to describe it, that's going to be really important in a later episode when I talk about how Windsor responded to the murder of George Floyd in 2020. So that's Windsor. It's a small town, it's in wine country, it loves its family values. So how did Foppoli become mayor of it? Well, let's start at the beginning. Foppoli was born in 1982, and honestly, I couldn't find much about his early life except for the fact that he went to Catholic high school, Cardinal Newman. And despite the fact that his Catholicism does seem pretty important to him throughout his life, I honestly think the reason that he went to Cardinal Newman was just because it was the most prestigious high school in the county at the time. Sonoma Academy actually didn't exist yet, and a huge impetus behind Sonoma Academy existing was that some of the parents wanted to be able to send their kids to private school and didn't want to have to send their kids to a religious private school. And Cardinal Newman was really the only like good private school. He did also go to a Catholic university, Dominican University, which was also only about an hour away from Sonoma County in San Rafael. While in college, most people join some sort of extracurricular, like a cappella. Ultimate Frisbee was really popular when I was in college. It's a really important way to make friends. However, Foppoli seemed pretty laser focused on pursuing the spotlight. And for him, I think pursuing the spotlight was just another way of pursuing power. He first pursued the most obvious spotlight you can think of, Hollywood, in 2002 by moving to LA at the age of 20. And his first accuser in the San Francisco crime is his girlfriend at the time. That's how far back it goes. When his acting career didn't pan out, I guess, he decided to immediately run for state assembly. And yeah, I guess he hadn't graduated college yet. He positioned himself as a compassionate, conservative Catholic businessman and used this picture of himself with Arnold Schwarzenegger on his campaign website. And one of the accusers volunteered on this campaign. So again, it goes all the way back to the very beginning. But his abusive, cruel, monstrous tendencies were also apparent in how he ran his campaign. I would like to read the following quote for you. He was trounced in the Republican primary by a Cloverdale rancher named Ray Tyrone, who despite the lopsided win still seemed scarred 17 years later by his brush with the Foppolis. Plural. They harassed the heck out of me, recalled Tyrone, who lost in the general election to Democrat Patty Burke. They said I was stealing money from old people, clear-cutting my property, running an illegal bar. It was all total bullshit. So, yeah, I found two things very interesting about that quote, that all the way back while he's in college running for state assembly, he's being accused of being abusive by his Republican counterpart in the primary, so a fellow Republican. Also, it would appear that his family members at this young age are kind of maybe enabling, maybe teaching him how to do this. Like, it's very strange. Editing right here again. Sorry I couldn't get a better screen grab so you could read along while I was reading that image. But I have the link to the article down below. So while I was failing to get you that image, I was rereading the article that I pulled that quote from. And I found it interesting that Tyrone actually also mentioned Foppoli was really being, really getting the message from the adults around him, including his family, but also including like other local politicians in the area. Foppoli was really getting the message already as this young upstart kid that he was all that. He stayed engaged in politics throughout his early life. I found a blog called The Really Right. So that's a conservative blog. And it's written by someone who appears to have gone to Dominican University around the same time as Dominic Foppoli. Editing right here. La, 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 la. So The Really Right, in rereading, again, trying to get graphics and failing for you, it was noted that The Really Right wants to emphasize that the articles that I'm citing aren't like the really right, but by this profile called The Chief. So do keep that in mind, that when I'm like putting up the graphic to refer to like, I got this off The Really Right, I'm referring specifically to the blogger who uses that platform, who refers to themselves as The Chief. And this conservative blog was alleging that Dominic Foppoli was doing racist things. So the story was that while he was a student at Dominican University, on like behalf of the Marin Republicans, Foppoli put up a bunch of signs for MLK Day that were racially insensitive. And this was a huge embarrassment to the Marin Republicans because they found out that Foppoli was actually a Sonoma Republican, but I guess because he went to school at Dominican, the Marin Republicans were embarrassed because of Foppoli's like racist MLK Day signs. So conservative blog, not me, this is what I found on the blog with the Google, is alleging that Foppoli was racist. This blog also alleges that Foppoli's close family friend / business partner, Liam McCormick, was involved and, socializing dangerously with Foppoli all the way back in college. And again, it's not just the blog that is alleging that Foppoli's bad behavior traces all the way back to college. The San Francisco Chronicle allegations start when Foppoli was 20. So The Really Right is just the one that's introducing, and it is a blog, it's different than the San Francisco Chronicle, is the one that's introducing the idea that Liam McCormick was someone who might have been involved in Foppoli's early years. Interestingly, the blog only says Liam. The blog never says Liam McCormick. Now, I feel comfortable saying Liam McCormick because apparently Liam's lawyer left a comment in this blog, like saying like, you have to take this down, this is slander or whatever. So because of this comment from the lawyer introducing like Liam McCormick's last name, I'm like, okay, well, if the lawyer is saying this is about Liam McCormick, I can definitely say this is about Liam McCormick, right? But I figured that the blog had to be talking about Liam even before I read the comment, because I had heard reference of Liam and Foppoli's relationship, their friendship, again, way before, and it was on their websites that Liam is like a close family friend. It was common public knowledge that Dominic Foppoli and Liam McCormick were really good friends. So, after graduating college and losing in the Republican primary for California State Assembly, Foppoli goes to the Republican National Convention in 2004. There, a New York Times reporter asked Foppoli what he had thought of the Bush twins, George W. Bush's twins, speech that they had just given. And what do you think he had to say? What do we think our charmer had to say? They're hot, and that he'd like to date them. And this is the final thing that I'm going to submit from the Really Right blog. And it's a quote that the writer actually wrote like to Foppoli about, I guess Foppoli invited this person to the convention. After George W. Bush got reelected, you, Foppoli, insisted I fly with you and several freshman girls to D.C. to see his inauguration. I declined. You called me a loser, among other things, and maybe I am. Yes, I passed on a trip where you promised me booze, girls, and other things. Congrats, you are a better partier than me. And I quote that quote not because it was the most inflammatory, but because it really lined up with my understanding of how Foppoli's later social clubs worked and how, well, I'll get to it then. But you kind of hear essentially how Foppoli is like peer pressuring this younger, I think, man into partying with him and making Foppoli's kind of creepy lifestyle seem cool and rock star and all that. And I really wanted to highlight that theme. So following the 2004 Republican National Convention, Foppoli goes on to intern for the Bush White House for the summer in 2005. Just the summer. Foppoli went on to completely misrepresent his time in the Bush office. So once again, I'm just going to read it. And just to be clear, all of these things I'm about to read that he claims he did, he didn't do. He claimed he was a policy analyst and advisor for the Bush administration, that he served on a gang task force in the White House, was a liaison between the White House and local governments, and that he promoted California wine in Mexico for the administration, all over the course of 3 to 6 months. He also claimed he was a staff member because he had his own office and security badge. It was confirmed with the White House officer that Foppoli was an intern for 2 months. When asked why he exaggerated, Foppoli blamed youthful enthusiasm. During this time, Foppoli's family had planted an estate vineyard and released their first wine to the public in 2006. 2006 is also the first year that Foppoli made a bid for Windsor Town Council. He was 24. He raised $19,000 and $5 more for his campaign, and $10,000 of that was his own money. And I am learning how to get the finance records from the state so that I can tell you where the next $9,005 came from. So stay tuned on that. Around 2007, Foppoli finally joined Active 2030, number 50 of Santa Rosa. Active 2030 is an international organization made up of local chapters, and the numbers, so Active 2030 number 50, the number refers to what chapter it is. A chapter is like a town or a city will have chapters, and you have multiple chapters. Like Santa Rosa has the all men's number 50 chapter, and there's also an all women's chapter. And so it's an international club made up loosely of all of these smaller chapters, and then these chapters, what they're supposedly doing is raising money for children's charities in their local communities. However, you could also just say that they're a bunch of frats. The vast majority of the fundraisers that they put on are just like parties or like events where people are binge drinking. The club that I was a prospective member for, number 205, we had our meetings at John and Zeke's, which locals will know for being like the local dive bar. And I don't mean that like disparagingly. I think local dive bars are great and really important. But that's not necessarily where meetings for children's charities should be taking place. So it seems pretty transparent to me that Foppoli has a lot of support from his family, financial support and otherwise. Foppoli's ties to his family businesses were what made him an attractive member to Active 2030 in the first place. Editing right here. I'm about to read a quote to you that's basically Foppoli's like whole family's description of Foppoli family wines. And it's been difficult for me to fully wrap my head around what Foppoli family wines is and if it really is a successful business. Like, it doesn't have a logo. As I just mentioned, it didn't produce wine for the general public until 2006. So it markets itself as a sort of, if you know, underground, covert, secret, cool label. But that could just all be branding. We don't know. The Foppoli family has been making boutique wines in California for nearly 100 years. The American practice started 5 generations ago when Giuseppe Foppoli created a high-end private label in a small production facility located in the North Beach section of San Francisco. Giuseppe only allowed the wine to be sold to a select list of longtime customers and in the 2 high-end private social clubs that he ran in the city. So when I say like recipe for corruption, I just mean that like it's very like behind closed doors, if you know type situation. Now let's fast forward to this Yelp review from 2012. Not only is this winery aesthetically very unappealing, but their wines are not worth paying for, and the Foppoli family is a group of tacky, unprofessional amateurs in the wine business. The tasting room consists of a cheap plastic table sitting on a dirt floor outside an overrun ranch house infested by vermin. In my experience, the Foppoli family cares more about collecting your money than your satisfaction as a customer. To be frank, I am stunned this place is still in business. Employees are unpleasant to be around, to say the least, and the entire setup is the opposite of charming. There are tons of professional, beautiful, and quality wineries in the area. Avoid Foppoli. I do think this review is dripping with a tad elitism. I don't really think there's anything wrong with like having tables outside and having dirt on the outside ground. Vermin is bad. And this wasn't the only Yelp review to specifically mention that like the Foppoli family was unpleasant to deal with. Who knows? Maybe the service was just bad in 2012 because they were focused on acquiring Christopher Creek Winery, which they did. Or I should say Foppoli's company, Two Kings Wine Company, LLC, acquired in 2012. He didn't co-own it with Liam McCormick, which is kind of what the website made me think. He co-owned it with Robert Dahl. So I Googled Robert Dahl, and Robert Dahl was like a professional crook of sorts who ended up swindling a lot of different wine players in the area out of money until he actually went on to, like, it's really dark, but he actually like is a murderer. And Foppoli was the first person that Robert did business with after he moved here from Minnesota. And Foppoli's parents had to bail him out of this business deal. And I mean, he never went to the police and he never warned enough people because Dahl continued to go on swindling other wine country industry professionals out of their money. Yet, when Foppoli was interviewed about this by CBS for the show 48 Hours, he said that he did business with Robert Dahl because he has like such a good sense of like what kind of person is a good person to do business with. But that person was a crook and a murderer. And he like doesn't seem to see how that doesn't go together. How like when you choose to go off your instinct and the how a handshake feels way of doing business, and then you pick the swindler, crook, murderer dude, that you're bad at that. The interview did not reflect that level of self-awareness and willingness to learn from mistakes. What it did reflect was the fact that Foppoli is very wealthy. Here's a little quote from that interview. So that Tracy, the interviewer, asked him, "Are there a lot of dreamers who come here to wine country?" He says, "Oh yeah, big time. Tech tycoons, Wall Street guys, rock stars, movie people, and they all want to come and have a slice of this. And a lot of people see the glamorous side of it without seeing the hard work that goes into it, the blood, sweat, and tears that it really takes to get the point where we're at now, of drinking a great bottle." Because yes, throughout this entire interview, he's drinking an entire bottle of wine because he works so hard. "How tough is it to break in?" the interviewer asked him. "It's very, very tough. Unless you're coming with a lot of money," which he was from a wine family. So in 2012, Foppoli's starting to look like a more serious, legitimate business person. He still has not successfully run for city council, but he now isn't just the kid Foppoli at Foppoli Family Wines. He runs Christopher Creek. He has Benevola Wines as well, which is now defunct. He's in Active 2030, making things happen. And then in 2013, his political career finally is legitimized, I would say, when Bruce Okrepkie, who was the Windsor Mayor at the time, appointed him as town commissioner on the Planning Commission. And then he finally was elected to city council in 2014. I find Bruce's decision to appoint Foppoli unfortunate for obvious reasons. I don't think anyone at this point would disagree with me that it was unfortunate that Bruce did it. But I also think that Like, Bruce should have known better, because Bruce was a former member of Active 2030 himself. His son, at that point, was on the board of Active 2030, number 50, his son Jeff. And Alison Britton had gone to Active 2030 in 2012 about her allegations against Dominic Foppoli. So to me, Bruce was the line of defense that could have had the necessary information to protect us from Foppoli. But he didn't do that. He did what he was supposed to and put the member of the all-men's club that had helped him establish his career, he paid it forward and gave a position to the next guy from this all-men's club. And as I alluded to last week, I launched this series now when I'm still not always sure what I'm doing. Like right now, I'm trying to wrap up this episode because I have 3% left on my camera, because I read that Jeff Okrepkie is now running for Santa Rosa City Council. The son of the person who is the one who could have protected Windsor and instead appointed him to town commissioner, Bruce, that guy's son is now running for Santa Rosa City Council. If you were to try and fact check me right now and go to Active 2030 number 50 Santa Rosa's website and look at the member history that they used to have there, you can't. You couldn't go and check and see Jeff's profile and see if like all the stuff I'm saying about him there is true anymore, because they took that down after the San Francisco Chronicle released their deeper dive into the nastiness that is Active 2030, especially number 50, which is cowardly. Let's be real, it's a cowardly thing to do. But you know what? Fact checking is really important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link the Wayback Machine, because nothing really is dead on the internet. So I'm going to link you to the Wayback Machine, the 2015 version of it, so you can see that Jeff was president. And then while you're on there, you can see who else was there any year you want. You're welcome. And if you want to take my word for it, here are the positions that Jeff Okrepkie has served in Active 2030. First vice president, second vice president, board member, district governor, event chair, president, visitation chair, key member, member of the year. He has also received an award for perfect attendance, and he has served as national president. Okay? So yeah, like I said, I would not be shocked if Active 2030 took down their member history because of Jeff's campaign. Next episode, I'll be telling you all about my experience in Active 2030, where I did meet not only Foppoli, but I met Liam McCormick, I met some other friends, I met Foppoli's girlfriend, so I'm going to tell you all about that in the next episode. Since my camera did die. Yeah, so the next episode will be out next Tuesday, January 11th. If you want to stay in contact until then, I am giving social media a try. My Instagram and my Twitter are here and linked below. If you enjoyed this video, it would be really great if you could like, or even better, leave a comment. But basically, the next video will be out Tuesday, January 11th. Tuesdays are when videos are going to come out. From here on out, I'm shooting for weekly. So until next time, you know you love me.